In two previous lessons, we've talked about the advanced levels of behavioral intervention. We talked about proactive strategies and responsive strategies. You'll remember we used a case study with one child from our summer camp named Taja. In this lesson, we want to take a single clip that you looked at previously, and we want to look at the ideal response as it correlates to internalizing behaviors. You'll remember the ideal response. We talk about immediate, direct, efficient, action-based, and leveled at behavior, not at the child. So in this lesson, what we'll want you to do is to look in small increments at a 5-minute clip that you saw previously, and be aware of in what ways the intervention, TBRI, is immediate for this situation, in what ways it's direct. Are there times that I'm touching the child's hands, holding her hands? Are there times that I even touch her cheek so that I'm close by? Is it efficient? There are a number of themes that we'll be exploring in this clip, and my colleague Dave Cross will join me today as we explore these issues. And one of those issues that we'll explore is how efficient is the intervention. So the modulation of the intervention and the modulation of the voice. And then action-based, so there are physical redos, and there are also verbal redos. You'll see in this circumstance a lot of verbal redo requests. And then, of course, always leveled at the behavior, never at the value or the preciousness of the child or youth that we're serving. So first, again, let's think about the context that we talked about in advanced level in terms of this clip of an internalizing behavior. We talked about the history as part of the context. Does the child have a history of trauma, fetal exposure to substance? Is this a very fearful child? Have they had many placements in either schools or homes, foster homes, facilities? Do they have, for example, sensory issues? What ways do their history make them fragile? And so that's one consideration when we work with a child in any context. And then there's a second context, and that is the current day, the hour, the moment. And we're looking for emotional overload if the child is feeling fear, sadness, shame, anger, any number of emotions. We're also looking at their physical needs. Are they fragile or vulnerable because of a physical need? Have they had food and water in the last 2 hours? Have they had a sensory activity to help them regulate themselves in the last 2 hours? And has this child been involved in a transition that might set them off in some way? Now, in the case of this clip, it's the 18th day of camp. We happen to know the child's history. She has history of substance exposure in utero as well as trauma prior to coming to the attention of Child Protective Services. We also know, in terms of the current context, that this child had had a golden day. Her food, water, sensory needs had all been met in a very short time from this. She'd been in a really good place all day. But towards the end of the day, she was asked if she could do an art activity, and her buddy said, "You'll need to ask Miss Mandy yourself if you can do an art activity, because it means we'd have to get out some special crafts." Now, before this day, remember this is day 18, and before this day, the buddies were content to let Taja say, "Would you please do this for me?" And in terms of this day, the buddy said, "No, this time you'll need to ask." So I'm going to ask my colleague Dave Cross to explore with me the themes that we're going to look at briefly as we set these up. But we're going to look at the interweaving of structure and nurture. You remember that we've talked about if we don't have a balance of structure and nurture, a child can't learn to trust us and they can't learn to grow. And so we'll see ways in which there's a balance of structure, nurture, and sometimes we'll lead with, as we said before, a structure foot, if you will, and sometimes we'll lead with a nurture foot. And so you will see the weaving of these things in context. You will see how the bar modulates high, low, and levels in between. So if the child is successful at a low bar, I may raise it a little. If they're unsuccessful at a high bar, I may lower it. The goal is to help this child succeed. We'll look at this clip in context of the ideal response, which we've spoken about before. And in particular, I want you to see that we're going to work on looking at being efficient. So I don't use a firm voice any longer than is absolutely required to begin to get this little girl back on track. And again, we'll think of this as a dance where the child will be responsive, we will be responsive. Look at the theme that we've spoken about previously. One of the reasons we use scripts is that our children need few words spoken slowly when they're in meltdown mode, and they need repetition. So look for this theme of repetition. Remember, a child with exposure to substance is a child with impaired brain processing. And so repetition is going to be required. And a final theme we'd ask you to be aware of is the theme of endearment. And that theme has been explored among parents and their children, among caregivers and their children. And in addition, that theme has been explored in some school studies with the school teachers in the New Zealand studies that were released.
Yes, one of the findings from those studies that looked at teachers who were able to create warm classroom climates was that they sprinkled terms of endearment into all their conversations with all of their children. And so they would use words like sweetie or honey or buddy or whatever it might be. And that seemed to be one important factor that helped create a bond between the teacher and the class and also among the children in the class.
So, and then a final thing we'd ask you to look at is the theme of voice. We've talked about this so many times before. You know that this runs through trust-based relational intervention work. Wherever we find children who are at risk, teaching them to use words, not behavior, to get their needs met is going to be a prime theme for us in all that we do. Now, we want to pull the first clip. We've broken a day 18 episode into 10 very brief episodes. We want to look at them briefly with you and talk collaboratively about them. In this first episode, this child is being asked to use her words, and you'll see her begin to fold. She's an internalizing child, remember, with a diagnosis of anxiety disorder called selective mutism. What you will note, though, is that there are two jerky movements that may even be clues to us of some type of seizure activity. Remember, when the amygdala fires, it jolts into all parts of the brain, and in many of the children that we have served over the years, that results in some type of blunted seizure activity. There is one type of seizure activity that is called without tone, atonic, that causes a child to jerk or to fall forward. And so we're going to be aware, knowing this child has a fragile brain chemistry, that she may be susceptible to that. What you want to see in this first 20 seconds of the opening of this episode is Taija with her buddies and Dr. Mandy, who are trying to help her resolve her need to do art by using words.
Come on, we'll do it together. I don't know what you need. Miss Manning, I'm wondering where what time is it?
Now, you can see that her buddies are being very kind with her. You can see that they're being very encouraging with her. But it's going to take a balance of structure and nurture with each of these themes in mind to work with the higher risk children. And so we see her as she begins to fold. Now, in the second episode, you're going to see her try to use her father as an escape. Children always should feel safe to go to their parents when they're in danger. This child's not in danger. She's going to him not of gentle or authentic affection, but she's going to him to avert accountability. And so we will ask the daddy to work with us. We want children to go to their parents when they're afraid, but we don't want them to go to their parents to get out of doing their business. Now, what you will hear me say is, over and over again, you can go to daddy after you finish business with me. And so we want her to know daddy is there. Daddy wants to connect. Daddy wants to give you comfort. That doesn't keep you out of being responsible to do what we're talking about. So in the second clip, you'll see Taija as she tries to escape to her father.
You don't want to find them? You want to just do something else? We're ready to use our words, Miss Mandy. We'll come find you, okay?
Okay, that's fine. I'll be ready to hear them when you guys are ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We doing okay?
Yeah. We're just trying to work on using our words. That's what we do.
Gotta work.
So here you've seen her go to her father, and her father's offering her comfort as any nurturing parent would, but what we want him to do is encourage her at this moment for growth. You're going to see us challenge this child like we have never challenged her before.
Yeah, if you watched our staff work with Taija in particular, but all of our children really, you'll see that there's a emphasis on nurture early in camp. This particular camp was 3 weeks long, and during the first 2 weeks there was less structure, but this week we really raised the bar. The buddies did, and now you're going to see Karyn do so, and our expectations are growing higher. And our goal is that children succeed, but we also want to raise the bar and increase the challenge as they're capable of meeting the challenge, so they're successfully, succeeding, at more challenging, social and emotional tasks.
So as we prepare to look at this clip where I will actually need to lead in many ways with structure, watch for the structure nurture balance and weaving, watch for the bar modulating up and down, watch for the efficiency with which we use a firm voice. We move into a firm voice only when necessary. Watch for repetition, for endearment, and then for the ways that not only that we use our voice, but that we try to teach her to use her voice.
Let me see us. We got to use words. Okay, please sit up here and talk to me. You can regulate yourself, or I will help you. Okay, please sit up like I am, okay? Let's talk. Come on, like Miss Karyn. Sit up right here, Miss Karyn. Atta girl. Sit up, right here. Okay.
Now, some people will question why I needed for her to sit up. What I am looking for is a child who is fully present. So I'm working to get full attention and compliance so that I know that I have a learning brain. The bar is a bit high. I'm working towards engagement with her. You'll hear repetition in that clip. But also what you'll see is I want to know that she has come to full attention. When I try to teach a child or work with a child on a serious issue or at a serious challenge. I need as much of their attention as I can garner. So I'm going to ask this child to match my body. I'm going to ask her to hold my hands, to look into my eyes, and I'm going to ask her to give me her full attention. So what you see in this clip is that structure and compliance precede and set the stage for engagement and connection. So in this next clip, you'll see that actually nurture leads here.
Give me hands. Miss Yes. We have to use some words, and I'll listen to anything you say, so people can understand what you need, and what you feel, and what you want. Okay? So, I thought you could go do some crafts.
She was going, we were looking for our artwork.
Yeah?
And,
Could you not find it?
No, we were going to ask Miss Mandy, but she didn't want to ask Miss Mandy. She wanted me to ask for her, and then told me, well, she has to use her words, and I would help her, but I wasn't going to do it for her.
Okay.
So what you see in that clip, the voice of the adults, my voice is gentle and playful. We've talked before about how a parent with their very small child has a voice that's melodic, that it has prosody in it, and that's a place we try to work with kids when we can. So you'll see that there was a significant amount of playfulness, a significant amount of gentle voice, soft voice, but you can also see that we're beginning to ask her to do something that's outside of her comfort range. This is really scary stuff for this child. We wouldn't attempt, as my colleague said a moment ago, this level of a requirement with a child who didn't know she was safe. Now, in the next clip, you'll see the interweaving. So listen to the voice. You might even just close your eyes if you remember enough from the last clip. Close your eyes and listen to a firm voice, gentle voice, a firm voice, a gentle voice. We only move into that firm voice very efficiently. You'll hear a lot of repetition. You will hear a gentle voice when it's possible. It'll move into firm. And you'll see us modulate structure and nurture.
Let's see. I like that little leg. Can you bring that leg back for me? Okay, so how about if I help you with it? All the way back. All the way. Good girl. I know it's hard, buddy. Sit up. Sit up. We have to use words. You can regulate, or Miss Karen's going to regulate you. No, no. Right here. Right here. No, no. Sit right up. We can't let her run away. She's got to participate. Taisha, turn around here, please. Right here. No, sweetie. Turn around here, right here. Come here. Give me hands. Fix your legs like Miss Karen. Do your legs like Miss Karen. Good girl. Good girl. Now, are you ready to ask Miss Mandy for your art? No? Okay, we need to use words. Words are what's going to help people know what you need and want. We can't help you if we don't. Hey, sit up, please. Daddy's going to be here for you. Daddy's going to be here for you. Okay? Daddy's going to be here for you. So here's Miss Mandy. Do you want to ask her? Sit up, please. Okay, now.
So here, if you listen to this type of interaction with a child, you'll see a lot of voice modulation where we'll move into a firmer voice and then immediately back down to a gentle, playful voice. You heard a number of terms of endearment. I hope that it's clear to this child and to an observer of this clip that this intervention is about her behavior and that she is precious. You'll hear us call her sweetie, buddy, pumpkin. You'll hear us call different terms of endearment. She knows that she's precious. She knows that she's valuable. And we know that this is very hard on her. We know that this is very scary stuff for her to risk using her words. And again, notice the numbers of repetitions. In each of these, you'll hear the same thing over and over again. Pay attention to one sentence that you have heard now maybe, I think, 3 times. Sweetie, you can regulate yourself, or Miss Karen will help you regulate. I'm giving this child notice of something she's learned. I'm giving this child a notice of something that she has learned in our nurture group, and she has learned how to be aware of the term regulate. So we say, can you regulate yourself, or do we need to regulate you? And so she understands from nurture groups, we've been practicing 3 ways that she can regulate herself. And so we're going to be trying to ask her to call on what she knows how to do, but letting her know that we can help her if she can't get there. Now, in this very, very brief clip that follows, again, you will hear the sentence, we're learning to use our words. You'll see her try to escape to her father again, which is not okay till she's finished business. And so look again for words of endearment, look for repetition and efficiency in this intervention.
Learning to use your words. Okay, please give me a hand. You can be with Daddy in just a second. Okay. We really need some words, Angel. You can tell me you're ready to do your artwork, and Miss Mandy's sitting here.
So here again, you hear me say, we really need some words, Angel Girl. You can tell me you're ready to do your art. So again, it's immediate. I'm right there with her. It's direct. I'm holding her hands. She's not pulling her hands away. Now, I'm not using my body when she goes towards her dad. I'm not using my body to pull her back. Remember, it's important for children to learn to listen to our word and obey our word, not what our bodies stop them from doing an action, unless, of course, there's imminent danger of harm. And in that case, you may have to stop a child from, for example, running into the street with your body rather than your word. But I'm as efficient as can be as in the situation. Now, you will hear me say, is that okay, buddy? Or would you work with me on that, buddy? And I'm looking for a verbal action-based response. So in this next clip, you'll see that we're going to lower the bar. It's just a couple of sentences. You're going to see that we're going to lower the bar to try to help her get over the bar successfully. Remember, again, I'm not married to an outcome except that this child is successful, that she learns, that she has powerful words, and that safe adults can understand what she needs, feels, thinks, needs, wants if she uses her words.
And I can say, you can say one word and let Buddy say the next word, or you can say 2 of the words and let Tiffany say 2 of the words.
I think one of the things that to think about is how is what Dr. Purvis doing here is how is it efficient? And it's efficient because she's only using as much firmness, as much structure as is necessary. She uses no more and no less. And so it's in that sense that these interactions are efficient because she's going to gentle, she's going to playful as much as she possibly can, and still helps this child be successful with this challenging task.
And again, in this circumstance, she saw us lower the bar. She wasn't able to get over a higher bar, so we're saying, look, buddy, you can say one word, and then we'll say the next word. Or you can say 2 words, and we'll say the next 2 words. Also, this is an opportunity for her to share power with us. It's counterintuitive for a lot of adults to share power with a child who's not in full control of themselves. But sharing power helps a child know that they're safe so that they can get greater control. Now, there's another episode, this segment 8, we want to show you.
Words are the last 2 words. Please sit up, please. You need to work. Sweetie, sit up. Sit up. We got to work on our words. Okay, I need some words from you. I need some words. I know you can give me words.
You start and you finish.
You want to start?
We have to use some words, but we have to use some words. I know you can give me words. Okay? I know you can give me words. When you finish working out the words with Miss Karyn, then you can go to Daddy's lap. Finish business with me. You need to finish business with me. I know it's hard, honey. But look, Tasha, sit up, please. Look, Miss Mandy.
Interestingly, even though she's distressed and tries to put her head on her daddy's shoulder, I have her hands loosely held in my hands. I'm not holding on to her. They're just loosely held in my hands. She never offers to pull her hands away from me. So she's not really trying to escape me, but she is leaning into her dad, and I keep reminding her she needs to finish business with Miss Karyn first. You may have seen me touch her cheek gently. You may have heard a couple of terms of endearment. This discipline or correction is not about this child not being precious, but it is rather about helping her learn to be successful in life. Again, you heard repetition in many different ways. And again, you saw these themes: structure, nurture, balance. You saw the bar raise and lower. You saw this dance of language where I only used the firmness in my voice. Matter of fact, an interesting activity we've done here in the lab is just listen to the audio of this and listen for the modulation in voice. And you can see the dance that goes on between this little girl and the adults in her environment. Now, in the 9th clip, the child continues to try to fold, but you're going to also see her begin to brave a few words.
Miss Kristen, Miss Tiffany. You want to do what, baby? Those are good words. Tell me you want to do what? Turn around, please. No, sir, we're not done. We're not done. I don't want to ask. You don't want to ask? Then can you give me words about what you'd like to do? I need words, not just a phone.
Again, you heard some firm words. You remember in an earlier lesson, we talked about a 10-year study on communication that came out of UCLA, and they found that almost 70% of communication was simply tone of voice, not words, but tone of voice. So a firm to redirect a child who's going to complete fold, and then being able to do an affectionate term, a term of endearment right following that. This is not about bringing a hammer down on a child. This is about teaching this little girl that she's got a powerful voice.
And I think it's important to realize that firm does not mean harsh. Firm is authoritative, but it's not frightening and it's not harsh.
In the final clip, we'll hear this child succeed.
You want what? You want to do art? Excellent. Excellent. So what do you need for art? Just make a guess, and we'll find it. Paint? You got it. That's great words. I can do that. I can do that. So do you know what paint is? All right. We got 10 minutes till my group, okay? You gonna go paint? All right. Hey, let me see eyes. Words. If you give people words, they can always help you, okay? But if you just fold up, we don't know what you need, right? Is that right? Yeah.
Okay. I just had 2 comments before Dr. Purvis wraps it up. One is that when we say direct in the ideal response, what you see here is a great example of it, because Dr. Purvis is directly engaged through physical touch of her hands with Taija. They're sitting face to face. They have a similar posture, so they're behaviorally matched, and then they're communicating with their voice. So there's direct engagement. And the action-based response that Dr. Purvis is looking for is Taija using her words. So the action is actually trying to use her words to have adults help her meet her needs.
So what we had as a goal was to help this little girl realize that she could use words with safe adults, to help her realize that she had power with her words. The only goal was to help her succeed. And so we're not committed to any particular strategy, but to finding a strategy that's flexible and that's responsive to the needs of this child. The ideal response is a response that can be used in every situation, and it gives us insights about how to help kids succeed at their highest level.